Good morning to another lovely day in Lockdown City, and today I'm going to be continuing the popular campaign against Stop Bible Abuse, a popular campaign that has one member. And I'm going to mention a quote that I've heard at, I think, every christening of a baby that I've ever been to. And it's that one where Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them. Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them." And it's quoted in churches that baptize babies. I suspect that many ordinary members of those churches think that that is the text that Jesus gave us to license and command us to baptize little infants. And it's been quoted to me a couple of times by Anglicans and Methodists and Catholics in a slightly accusing way, because of course us horrible Baptists and those horrible Pentecostals and those horrible Brethren-y types, we don't baptize babies. We don't think it's a good idea, and we stand accused of preventing children from coming to Jesus, because Jesus says we should let them come to him. Withholding baptism from infants is therefore naughty. Well, I would contend that you can't find infant baptism in the Bible at all, and that this passage isn't really about it. Now, the men who do it, the theological guys, the vicars and the priests and all the rest of it, they have other theological justifications. For instance, if you're a Roman or Anglo-Catholic priest, then you are meant to believe that you're actually giving that baby new birth when you baptize them. They're being regenerated. That is the moment when God does the miracle of regeneration. The baby is literally born again, and the priest has the power to pass on the gift of eternal life. I don't know how many people actually believe that, but that's the doctrine. I have an Anglican friend in Africa who sent me a correspondence arguing that I should be baptizing babies because it protects them from evil spirits. His argument was that there's some kind of blessing involved in the rite of infant baptism, even if it isn't regeneration. Now, I don't think that would wash in Britain, but where you have a lot of people in your congregation frightened of the power of witchcraft, I suppose you might well get many of them bringing their babies just in the hope that there might be a bit of extra protection in the ritual. Evangelical Anglicans in this country tend to, if you press them up against the wall, will fall back on something called covenant theology, which I don't have time to describe. They've borrowed it from their Presbyterian friends. And it's quite a sort of complete explanation that there is an ongoing covenant between God and either the church or the Christian nation. It varies. But the mark of the covenant is baptism, which, considering you do it with water, is a bit strange. It's not much of a mark. And it's a continuation of circumcision. But the good thing about baptism is that you can baptize little girls as well as circumcise little boys. So that's the idea, that somehow it's the old covenant carried on in some way. Now, I think all of those are weak ideas. I think the only Bible justification for this text that I've come across is this one about "let the little children come to me." So it's time to read the passage. This is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 18, starting verse 15. People were also bringing babies to Jesus for him to place his hands on them. When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them. But Jesus called the children to him and said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." There are parallel passages in both Mark and Matthew, but Luke is the only one that mentions babies. The usual word used for children, paidion, can mean basically any child up to about 13, the age when you had to take on some adult responsibility. So I think the baby baptizers like Luke best because the word babies occurs here. People were bringing babies to Jesus. Funnily enough, in the verse that's quoted, let the little children come to me, that's just the ordinary word for children. So, does this passage talk about baptism? Well, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything about baptism here. The mothers aren't bringing their babies to be baptized. They want Jesus to lay his hands on them and presumably maybe say a blessing. A simple blessing. In fact, just what Pentecostals and Baptists and Brethren people do with their babies, funnily enough. Now, there was a lot of baptizing going on. John's people were still baptizing, but we're told in another gospel, in the Gospel of John, that actually Jesus's people were baptizing more candidates than John's people. So you have John's people busy baptizing and Jesus's people baptizing. So if Jesus wanted to make a point about baptizing babies, it was simple. All he had to say was, let the children be baptized and do not stop them. But he doesn't say that, does he? He just says, let them come to me. After Jesus blessed them, he didn't say to the disciples, okay, down to the river. No, that's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to pray for them, lay hands on them, maybe talk to them. So what is this passage about then? If it's not about baptizing babies, well, I think it's about faith. Jesus says that we must all receive the kingdom like little children. And he actually says it's impossible to enter the kingdom if you don't receive the kingdom of God like a little child. Now the parents acted in faith, didn't they? They believed in Jesus enough to bring their children. And Jesus validated and agreed with their faith when he blessed their children. And then Jesus calls for the older children. He doesn't call for the babies. He calls for the ordinary word for children, paidia. And he calls for them and he says, come to me. And they do come. So presumably they've got legs that work. So I see this as being Jesus having blessed the babies and then calling the toddlers or calling the infant age kids, and they come to him. And what he talks about then is their faith. Jesus calls and they come. And it really is that simple. Jesus calls us and we're meant to come to him. We are meant to exercise the faith of a little child who responds to the call, the invitation to come. They trusted him. They trusted him enough to come and see him. Now, we do train our children sometimes to ignore strangers, don't we? But in this case it was perfectly okay. This isn't any old stranger, this is the Messiah, and he's calling them and they're coming. He talks about the quality of their faith. It's straightforward. They answer his call and they arrive. And what he's saying is, we need to be like that. We need to just come to Jesus. We need to come to Christ. So it's not just about little children coming to Jesus. It's about how anyone comes to Jesus. Do not hinder them. Elsewhere we are warned that if we put a stumbling block in anyone's way as they're coming to Jesus, then we're in big trouble with God. So we shouldn't hinder anyone who is on that wonderful journey, responding to the call of Jesus and coming to him. And let's check ourselves. Let's make sure that my faith and your faith really is the faith that simply believes and comes to Christ. The discipleship of a little child is the model for us. So yes, let the little children come to Jesus. Let us come to Jesus. Let the world come to Jesus. And do not hinder anyone. Teach the gospel to children, teach it to teenagers, teach it to grown-ups. And as for who you should baptise, well, that's for another day. But for now, I don't want to hear anyone quoting this passage to me about why I should baptise babies. So stop Bible abuse. That's my thought for the day. I pray that you'll have a good day walking with Christ and coming to him. Bye for now.